owning a home, I mean, it feels like it's getting further and further out of reach these days for so many people.
Yeah.
Prices are crazy.
Absolutely.
And who wants to be stuck with a mortgage all by themselves? It can be really intimidating. But what if there was a way to kind of team up with people, pool your resources, and make that dream of owning a home, actually affordable? Well, that's what we're going to dive into today. We're talking about group buying homes.
Yeah. It's a super interesting concept, and it's really gaining traction, especially in those markets where the competition is just fierce.
Yeah.
So instead of going it alone, you're basically creating this home buying team with other people who have the same goals as you.
I got to admit, the first time I heard about this, I was like, wait a minute, is that even legal? How does that work? So let's break it down.
Okay.
What are the key features of group buying? Like, how does this whole thing actually operate?
So at its heart, it's really about harnessing this collective buying power. So picture this, right? You and two friends all want to buy homes in, let's say, a popular city where prices are through the roof. Now, on your own, each of you might be completely priced out of the neighborhoods you love, right?
Right.
But when you join forces, all of a sudden, boom, you've got a much bigger down payment.
Right.
You've got a much better chance of getting a loan, and you could potentially get into properties that you could only dream of before.
So you're basically like tripling your buying power.
Exactly.
Which in a market like that is huge.
Oh, yeah. It's a game changer for sure.
Yeah. But it can't just be about the money, right? I mean, there's got to be a ton of trust involved, especially when we're talking about like who actually owns the place.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Trust and transparency are like the pillars of this whole thing. Typically, when you're doing group buying, ownership is either divided up equally among everyone,
Okay.
or it's proportional. So it depends on how much each person puts in financially.
I see.
So let's say you contribute 40% of that down payment. Well, you typically own 40% of the property. But here's where it gets super important.
Okay.
You need a rock-solid legal agreement. Think of it like a prenup for homeowners.
Okay, now that's an analogy I can understand.
Right.
So we're not just talking about like a handshake deal here.
Oh, definitely not.
Yeah.
You need a lawyer to draft this comprehensive contract.
Okay.
And that contract needs to cover every single detail.
Okay.
Everything from the percentage each person owns, how much they contributed financially, all the way to how you're going to make decisions and what happens if someone wants out. It's there to protect everyone involved.
So it's not just about, pooling the money for the initial purchase?
Nope.
It's also about setting some really clear ground rules.
Yes.
For how you manage the property.
Absolutely.
And how you make decisions as a group.
Together, exactly.
Right.
And that actually leads us to another big piece of group buying. Shared responsibilities.
Okay.
It's not just splitting that mortgage payment, right?
Right.
It's also about sharing the upkeep, the maintenance, and even making decisions on things like renovations or repairs.
Okay, so help me out here, right? Let's say I'm thinking about this beautiful brownstone that I could never afford on my own,
Right.
but now I'm picturing sharing it with two other people.
Sure.
So, like, who decides who gets which bedroom? Who's on lawn mowing duty? What happens if I want to, like, redo the kitchen, but the other folks aren't into it?
These are all really good questions, and you know what? The answers to all of them,
Okay.
they're going to be in that super important group buying agreement we talked about.
Okay.
So you might decide, hey, let's rotate chores, or let's just hire a property manager, or you might even set up a system for voting on the big decisions.
So I guess, like, communication and compromise are even more important than if you were just sharing an apartment with someone?
Oh, absolutely. Group buying is all about collaborating and finding solutions that work for everyone.
Gotcha. Okay, I'm starting to see both, like, how cool this could be, but also, how complicated it could get. But before we jump into those challenges, let's talk about why people are choosing this. What are some of the big advantages of doing this whole group buying thing?
Well, affordability is the biggest one, especially in the market we're in now. By pooling resources, you can get into properties and neighborhoods that have been impossible on your own.
Right.
And it goes beyond just the purchase price.
Okay.
Imagine cutting your monthly mortgage payment in half, or even more. Think of the financial freedom that gives you.
Oh, yeah.
It's less stress, more breathing room to do other things you love, travel, investing, or just enjoying life without that mortgage looming over you.
That's a pretty big selling point, especially with housing costs going up like crazy.
For sure. And then there's the whole community aspect, right?
Yeah.
You're going on this home ownership journey with people who are like-minded,
Yeah.
maybe even friends or family, or
Right.
building a support system, sharing the load, and celebrating the wins together.
It's like taking something that can be kind of lonely, buying a home, and turning it into something you do with people.
Exactly. It's a shared adventure.
I like that. And I know we touched on this earlier, but let's not forget about, the investment potential.
Oh, yeah.
Real estate is usually a pretty solid investment, but going it alone, that can tie up a lot of your money.
So much.
But with group buying, you diversify your portfolio.
Yeah,
You own a piece of something without having to shoulder the whole burden.
exactly. You're spreading the risk, and you might get access to a more valuable property than you could on your own.
Yeah, like a team effort to build wealth.
That's it. And it can open up some unique opportunities.
Like what?
Imagine pooling your money with friends to buy a vacation home you can all share.
Oh, that's a good one.
Or, if you're thinking about business, you could co-buy a multifamily property and get rental income together.
Okay, I'm seeing the possibilities here,
Right.
but I know we also need to talk about the potential downsides, right?
Oh, yeah.
What are some of the things that people should be aware of
Crucial.
if they're thinking about going down this road of group buying?
Well, group buying has a lot of upsides, but it's not without its challenges.
Yeah.
And probably the most common one is, disagreements.
Yeah.
When you have multiple people involved, there are bound to be times when you don't see eye to eye.
Right.
It could be about something small like what color to paint the walls.
Yeah.
Or it could be something big like whether to sell the place.
So, like, what if I want to put in a hot tub, but my co-buyers think it's a waste of money?
Exactly. And it's not just about personal preferences.
Okay.
What if one person wants to do a huge renovation that the others can't afford?
Right.
Or what if someone hits hard times and can't keep up with their payments? These are all things you have to think about carefully and address in that initial agreement.
It sounds like really clear communication
Yeah.
and a solid plan for resolving conflicts are like essential.
Absolutely.
You don't want to end up in court with the people you bought a house with.
No, that's the last thing you want.
Yeah. And that brings up another thing, right? Like all the legal and financial stuff that goes along with this.
Yeah, it can get complicated.
So it sounds simple, right? Oh, we're going to buy a house together.
Right, in theory.
But there's a whole other layer of, legal stuff and finances to figure out.
Absolutely. This isn't something you want to try to do yourself.
Okay.
You need a good real estate lawyer on your team
So that they can.
to make sure that your agreement will hold up
Right.
and that you understand all your rights and responsibilities.
Okay, so we've got potential conflicts. We've got legal stuff to figure out. Anything else we should be aware of on the, downside of this?
Well, there's one more really crucial thing to think about, and it's probably the most important. Your exit strategy.
Okay.
Life is full of surprises.
Right.
Things change.
Mhm.
What happens if one of you wants out of the deal down the road?
Okay, so, let's say one of the people I buy with gets an amazing job offer in another state.
Exactly.
What happens then?
You need a plan, right? A plan for how someone can sell their share or transfer it without creating chaos for everyone else.
Okay.
So your agreement should cover things like buyouts, the right of first refusal,
Right.
or even how to sell the whole property if you need to.
So it's like having a roadmap for, those what-if moments that life throws at you.
That's a great way to put it. It's all about being prepared, having a plan, so you can transition smoothly, even if things get unexpected.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground already in this first part of our deep dive. We've talked about what group buying is, the good, the bad, and some really important things to think about if you're thinking about trying it out.
Yeah, we've laid the groundwork.
For sure. And coming up in the next part, we're going to really zoom in on the heart of any group buying venture.
Yes,
The agreement itself.
it's all about the agreement.
We'll break down what needs to be in it and why it's so important to get it right.
It's your protection, your roadmap, it's everything.
So if you're intrigued by this whole idea of group buying, stick with us for part 2. We'll give you the knowledge you need to decide if it's the right move for you. All right, welcome back to our deep dive into group buying homes.
Yeah, we're ready to keep going.
In the last part, we talked about what group buying is, some of the potential ups and downs, and just some things to think about if you're even, considering this whole thing.
Right, laying the foundation.
Exactly. But now it's time to really get into the details.
Yeah, let's get specific.
Those group buying agreements.
Oh, yeah, this is where the rubber meets the road.
Because, this is really what sets you up for success.
Yes.
And, hopefully a harmonious experience as co-owners.
Absolutely. Think of it as, the rule book
Okay.
for your home buying team.
I like that. Okay, so we know they're important,
Really?
but what exactly should be in one of these things? I feel like we're about to go down a legal rabbit hole.
Well, let's go down it together.
Right.
So a really well-written agreement, it should cover all the major parts of co-ownership
Okay.
to like really minimize the chances of misunderstandings and arguments later on.
Okay, so less drama.
Way less drama, exactly.
Okay, so where do we even start? What are like the must-haves in one of these agreements?
Okay, first things first, you got to clearly identify everyone involved.
Okay.
And I mean, everything,
Right.
full names, contact info, the whole 9 yards. This might seem obvious, but you'd be surprised.
Yeah.
It's so important to establish who's who right from the start.
Yeah. You don't want any surprises down the road.
No surprises, no hidden players, exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. What's next?
All right, so next up, you need a super detailed description of the property itself.
Okay.
And I'm talking the address, the legal description, anything that makes it super clear what you're buying together.
So not just like a cute house with a blue door.
No, we need the official specs, legalese.
Okay, got to be specific. All right, what else?
Okay, now this is a big one. The ownership structure.
Ooh.
This section spells out exactly how ownership is divided up among all the co-buyers.
Okay, so back to that whole like equal shares versus proportional shares thing.
Right, exactly.
How do you decide like which way to go with that?
That's a conversation you got to have as a group.
Okay.
Are you all going to have an equal slice of the pie, or is it going to be based on how much each person chips in?
Okay.
So, like, remember, if you put in 40% of the down payment, you might own 40% of the property.
Right, right.
But it's all got to be written down nice and clear in the agreement.
So everyone knows what's what.
Exactly. Everyone's contribution needs to be recognized and protected legally.
Okay, that's fair. So contributions, we're talking money, right?
Oh, yeah. Money talks.
Yeah.
The agreement has to spell out every single financial contribution required from each person.
Everything.
Everything. We're talking the down payment, closing costs, mortgage payments every month, property taxes, insurance, even those pesky maintenance costs.
Wow. Okay. So it's like a super detailed financial plan for the property.
That's a great way to put it. It's like a roadmap for your money.
Okay. Roadmap for the money. Got it.
And speaking of roadmaps,
Yeah.
your agreement also needs to establish how you're going to make decisions about managing the property.
Okay. So like who gets to call the shots
Yeah, exactly.
for things like repairs or renovations or even like renting out a room?
All of that. You might decide to go with a majority rule system.
Okay.
You might pick one person to be the decision maker.
Okay.
Or you might say, hey, let's collaborate on everything.
Okay.
The key is to find a system that prevents things from getting stuck and lets you deal with issues fairly and quickly.
This feels like it could prevent a lot of arguments down the line.
Oh, absolutely. Clarity and having a process from the get-go. That's key.
Okay. So less drama.
Way less drama. Okay, and while we're on the topic of keeping things smooth,
All right.
let's talk about everyone's responsibilities as a co-owner.
All right. So we're talking chores, right?
Chores, yeah.
Who does what?
See, exactly. Who's handling maintenance, repairs, yard work, even taking out the trash, all that good stuff.
I mean, you got to divvy it up somehow.
You do, by making it super clear who's responsible for what.
Right.
You can make sure things run smoothly,
Yeah.
and nobody feels like they're doing more than their fair share.
Plus, way less passive-aggressive notes on the fridge.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
So let me just recap because I want to make sure I'm following.
Sure.
You've got identifying everyone, outlining all the property details,
Yeah,
figuring out the ownership structure, detailing all the money stuff,
right.
setting up a system for making decisions, and then outlining everyone's responsibilities.
You got it.
Anything else we need to cram into this agreement?
All right, one more big one, and it's probably the most important of all, the exit strategy.
Okay, yeah, I have a feeling this is where things could get tricky.
It can be.
Because life happens, right?
It does.
Things change, and what if down the road someone needs to sell their share or just wants to?
Exactly, and that's why you have to plan for it up front. So this section, the exit strategy, it lays out exactly how a co-owner can sell or transfer their part of the property without turning everything upside down.
Okay, less chaos.
Way less chaos.
Mm.
It might include things like buyouts, rights of first refusal, or even procedures for selling the whole property if you have to.
Okay, break those down for me.
All right, so a buyout provision. That basically sets the rules for how one co-owner can buy out another person's share.
Okay.
It might say, how you decide what the share's worth,
Okay.
or set a timeline for the whole buyout process.
So let's say I want to, I don't know, move to a tropical island,
Okay, I like where this is going.
and one of my co-buyers wants to buy me out. The buyout provision would, like, lay out how we do that?
Exactly.
Okay, and what about that right of first refusal thing?
Okay, so that's a little different.
Okay.
Let's say one of your co-buyers wants to sell their share, but it's someone outside of your group.
Okay.
The right of first refusal gives the other co-owners the chance to buy that share first, before some random person gets it.
So it's like we get first dibs.
You got it first dibs, it keeps your group intact, and it prevents, someone you don't know from suddenly being part of the deal.
Right, no surprises. Okay, so we've covered a lot.
Yeah.
Anything else super important for these agreements?
Just a couple more things to keep in mind. You want to have a clear process for resolving disagreements.
Right, because those are going to happen.
Oh, they're inevitable.
Yeah.
So whether it's a little thing, like what kind of curtains to get,
Yeah.
or a big thing, like should we add another bathroom?
Right.
You need a way to figure it out without it turning into a huge fight.
Okay, so like mediation, maybe?
Exactly. Mediation or even arbitration, those are way better than, ending up in court.
Right, right. And what about taxes?
Ah, yes, taxes.
Yay.
Don't forget those.
Okay.
Co-owning a property, it's got different tax implications than owning one by yourself.
Okay, how so?
You'll want to talk to a tax pro to understand how things like rental income,
Okay.
property tax, capital gains, all that stuff, how it works when you have multiple owners involved.
So we've got our lawyers, we've got our tax people, we've got it all covered.
You got it. And remember, all of this is just a general overview.
Right.
It's really crucial to have an actual real estate attorney look over your agreement
Okay.
to make sure it follows all the laws and protects everyone involved.
Okay, so lawyer up, basically.
Yeah, it's worth it.
Okay, so these agreements, they're really the foundation of this whole group buying thing.
They are the foundation, absolutely.
They're what make it work.
They're your protection, your roadmap, your everything.
All right, good to know. But even with the best agreement, I mean, things can still go wrong, right?
They can, and we're going to talk about that in the next part of our deep dive. We'll explore those potential pitfalls and what you can do to avoid them.
Okay, so welcome back to the final part of our deep dive on group buying homes. We've talked about what it is, the pros and cons, those super important agreements. But before we wrap things up, let's talk about what could go wrong, right? Like, what are the risks?
Right, because even with the best planning, even with a really solid agreement, there are always some risks when it comes to real estate. And group buying, well, it's no different.
Right. So let's get into it. What are some things that should make people think twice, proceed with caution if they're thinking about group buying?
Okay, well, one of the biggest red flags is, like, if there's not a lot of communication between the co-buyers,
Okay.
or if things aren't very transparent,
Okay.
if you're not having those open and honest conversations right from the start about what you want, your budget, what you expect, that's a bad sign.
So, like, if someone's being kind of cagey about their finances or they're not really clear about their long-term plans for the property,
Exactly.
that's a warning sign.
Big time. You've got to be on the same page from the beginning. This is a partnership.
Right?
It needs a lot of trust,
Right.
and everyone needs to understand what everyone else is thinking.
Makes sense. What else?
Another thing is, don't rush into signing an agreement without doing your homework.
Okay.
Remember all that stuff we talked about?
Yeah.
Researching, planning.
Yeah.
That's so important. You don't want to make a mistake that's going to cost you a lot of money.
So no jumping in head first just because you found the perfect house.
Exactly. Take your time, research the market, get a good home inspection.
All right.
Make sure you're happy with the property and the people you're going to be co-owning with before you sign anything.
Gotcha. So communication, transparency, due diligence.
Those are the big ones.
Got it. Any other red flags?
Another potential pitfall is, like, not really thinking about the what ifs.
Oh, okay.
Life throws curveballs, right? Things happen.
All right.
So, like, what if one of the co-buyers loses their job or has some financial problems? What if someone has to move suddenly? What if there's a big repair that's going to be expensive?
Yeah, I've been there with roommates before.
Oh.
Like someone gets a pet without talking to everyone else first. It doesn't always end well.
Exactly. And when you're talking about owning a property together, well, the stakes are way higher.
Right.
You're putting in a lot of money, and there are a lot of emotions involved. So those tough conversations, you got to have them up front. It's so much better to talk about potential problems before they happen.
So you can avoid conflict and stress later.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So think about those individual life changes too, right?
Yeah.
Like, what if someone gets married, has kids, or just decides they want something different?
Okay.
Having a clear exit strategy in your agreement can really help you navigate those changes without it being a
Yeah.
disaster.
You got to have a plan B, just in case.
You got it.
Okay.
And we can't forget about market risks either.
Right, because those can happen to anyone.
Oh, yeah. Property values go up and down. Interest rates can change.
Right.
The economy can do all sorts of crazy things.
So even if you're in a group, you're not, like, totally protected from those risks.
Right. Group buying can help reduce some of the individual risk,
Okay.
but you still got to pay attention to what's happening in the market.
So we've talked about red flags, things that could go wrong, even those things you can't control, like the market.
Right. It's a lot to consider.
What are some things people can do to, like, minimize those risks,
Yeah.
to make this whole thing more likely to be successful?
Well, we've already talked about some of the big ones, right?
Yeah.
Open communication, do your research, get that agreement right.
Okay.
But it's also a good idea to have a reserve fund, for those unexpected expenses.
Okay, so like an emergency fund, but for the house.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Like what if the roof starts leaking
Right.
or the furnace breaks in the middle of winter? That fund can help cover those costs.
That makes sense.
And it can also help if one of the co-buyers can't make their payments, for property taxes or insurance.
Oh, it's like a safety net.
Exactly. A
Yeah.
financial cushion to prevent problems.
I like it. And since we're talking about sharing the responsibility, what about disagreements?
Ah, yes, those. You need a clear process for how you're going to handle them. It doesn't matter if it's something small, like what color to paint the living room,
Right.
or something big, like should we add on a whole new room.
Right.
Having a way to work through those disagreements can save you a lot of headaches,
So again, communication is key,
always.
and having a plan before things get out of hand.
Exactly. And that agreement we talked about so much.
Yeah.
Don't just forget about it after you sign it.
Okay.
Things change, people change, your needs change. It's a good idea to look at it every so often.
Okay.
Update it, make sure it still works for everyone.
So it's about being proactive, not just reactive.
Exactly. Group buying can be a really great way to buy a home,
Yeah.
but it takes work. You have to communicate, collaborate, share the responsibility.
Okay. Well, we've talked about a lot, the basics of group buying, what could go wrong, how to make it work. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's your final thought for our listeners who are thinking about doing this?
If you're interested in group buying, the first thing you need to do is really think about yourself. Are you the kind of person who can do this?
Okay.
Can you share decisions, share responsibilities, maybe even share your living space? If you can, and if you're willing to put in the time to plan carefully, talk openly, and build strong relationships with your co-buyers,
Okay.
then yeah, group buying might be a great option for you.
Awesome. Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about.
I hope so.
Whether you decide to go it alone or team up with some folks, we wish you all the best in finding your dream home.